Hello everyone, this is Post-Production Pie, Editor-in-Chief for srlounge.com. Welcome to another installment of our weekly Ordinary to Extraordinary Raw Edit featuring the Lightroom preset system V5. Now as always, we'll be demonstrating how to create our lovely effects using the preset system, and then we're going to be going through the actual developed settings just to help everybody understand what's going into each look and effect. That way everybody watching the tutorial can benefit. Now if you are interested in learning more about the SR Lounge Lightroom preset system, then be sure to click the link below in the description and it'll take you over to the SR Lounge store. Alrighty, let's get started. In this video, we're going to be going over creating a very natural HDR effect for portraiture. And this is one of the tutorials that we get requested the most, is how to do this effect. Now, before we get started on this, I want to go over the camera settings because it's very important to shoot this type of image correctly to get the best results out of these types of single shot HDRs. We call them basically faux HDRs. All right, so let's go over the information real quick. We're going to hit I to bring it up. This was shot on a Canon 5D Mark III. We're on a 17-40 f4L lens, and we're shooting at 29 millimeters width, so it's not fully wide, but it's pretty wide. All right, and then we are at 1/4 of a second at f5.6 at ISO 100. This lens is actually notoriously soft at f4, so we're trying to bump it up as much as possible at f6. We could have gone up a little bit more even, but at 1/4 of a second, we're freezing the water pretty well in this shot. So we're leaving it there. You could have gone down to 200, maybe even 100 if you didn't mind the water being a little bit blurry, but either way, it's all good, baby. Okay, so this is how it was shot from a exposure standpoint, but what's important here is the histogram, okay? We have our image fully reset out, and this is how we're exposing for this type of image. Now remember, our cameras have a very limited, well not very limited, but they have a more limited dynamic range than our eye does. Okay, so if our eye sees 20 stops, our camera is only seeing between 12 and 14, somewhere in between there. And of course that obviously depends on the camera make and model. So for example, on a D800, you're gonna see 2 extra stops, or at least like 1.5 extra stops than compared to say a 5D Mark III, which is what we're shooting on here. So we have to be very, very precise with the exposure to make sure that our blacks are not fully clipped on this side, and to make sure that our highlights aren't fully blown on this side. We want to basically expose so we have as much of the tonal range within the captured information as possible, just like this. Okay, so basically we can't really go to either side without clipping more highlights or without blowing more of the shadows. And you always want to kind of expose a little bit more bias towards the highlight side because it'll be a little bit more clean of an image. So just make sure your shadows aren't too clipped, otherwise it's going to look really, really awful. Okay, so that's a little note on this is basically how you want to shoot these types of image by maximizing the tonal range. We do that, by the way, by turning on the histogram in the camera. I do a live preview and I'm just adjusting to get the maximum tonal range in that histogram in that live preview. All right, so let's start things off. We're going to go and actually adjust first our dust correction curve, just so I can clean up 2 little noticeable dust spots that I'm seeing. So I'm going to click there, and we're just going to remove these 2 spots. And then I'm going to just reset the curve just to make sure everything looks okay. It's pulling from far away, but it looks like it's okay, so I'm not too worried about it. And now we're going to go to the soft base category, and we're going to start with the HDR curve, or not the HDR curve, the HDR presets. Now what I like to do is flip between these, and again, this is the power in the preset system because you can flip between them and see how much of an HDR effect that you want. Going all the way to HDR max is going to give you the most dramatic HDR effect, and backing it off is going to give you more and more realistic images. Now I'm kind of somewhere between the medium and the heavy, so I'm going to go with the heavy on this one, and it includes skin desaturation. So if you're wondering why don't we use the vivid version, well, because the vivid version really isn't designed for people, and I think we chose the HDR heavy. So if we choose HDR heavy on this side, you're going to see that it's a lot more vibrant, but also we have a lot of crazy skin tones here. So I'm going to kind of opt for the more subtle version of this. The vibrant is really more meant for, say, landscapes and that kind of stuff. Now with this image, and plus I don't necessarily like it being super saturated like that, but that is a stylistic thing. I'll let you guys make up your own minds as always. All right, so now I'm going to tweak my temperature, and I'm not really looking here to get, like, say, flawlessly accurate skin tones. What I'm looking to do is kind of really add a little bit of mood to the image. And we have a sunset image here, so I want to kind of add that warmth to it. So I'll be right around probably 6,500 Kelvin. That looks really nice. The tint, I'm totally fine with. It looks great there. And all I'm going to do now is just hit R so that I can kind of fix my crop and straighten out my horizon line just a bit. I'm going to actually pull it up a little bit too. So let's pull it up just a tiny bit and bring it over. And this is looking really solid right here. So now beyond this, we're gonna be making all of our additional adjustments by using adjustment brushes. So let's just take a quick look at our before and after before we go into our develop settings. So here is the before, here is the after. So you can see how much dynamic range that preset is able to pull out. All right, let's actually go over the develop settings and then we're gonna jump into kind of finalizing and perfecting this image. Now here we just adjusted temperature tint and we don't need to really touch exposure. If you want, you can brighten up, you can darken up. What I like about this image is kind of that more moody vibe. I don't want their skin to be super bright. If I brighten it up like this, we really lose the ambience of kind of that sunset and everything. And I want kind of have that more romantic and dark feeling to the image. So I'm gonna leave that where it's at. I'm not trying to expose for the skin. I'm trying to get that nice romantic look, but showing detail in the shadows. So to get our detail out, we're dropping highlights by -75, whites by -75. We're raising shadows by +75 and blacks by +75. This is basically bringing up the shadows, pulling down the highlights, and we're balancing out all of our tones, which is retaining our shadow detail. So that's why if I were to say go to the before, the sky's gonna look pretty similar in the before, but you see the shadows all revealed here. All right, now we have added 75 contrast because adding back that dynamic range by dropping highlights and whites and adding shadows and blacks, well, it kills your overall contrast. So if we didn't have that contrast adjustment, it ends up looking super flat like this. Okay, so I'm gonna undo that little adjustment right there. Now, with clarity, we have -10. Again, this is to kind of soften up, but this is really more of an environmental portrait, and if it was set to 0, it really wouldn't be bad either. So I'm gonna leave it at -10 because it does have a nice softening effect around the edges of our couple, which I kind of dig. And then with vibrance and saturation, this is where we're dropping it. Now, what you can do is if you want a little bit more vibrance and saturation, but still keeping some of the reds out, well, you can just reset vibrance and saturation while leaving our HSL basically with negative reds and negative oranges. That'll give you back a little bit of the overall saturation without sacrificing too much of the skin tones over here. So we'll make that minor adjustment and then we'll go into the tone curve. With the tone curve, we have a standard S curve that's adding a little bit of contrast. Here we have our -20 and -10 for our skin. And with an image, if we were doing an image that the skin was more noticeable, I probably would not have made that vibrance and saturation adjustment right there. But with this shot, it's really pulled back and our skin tones are really dark, so you won't be able to tell. All right, let's zoom in real quick and check out our sharpening. We have 71.510, that's our standard amount. It's looking good. You can see a little bit of noise here in the grain, especially in these shadows, and that's why noise reduction is bumped to 40. So it's automatic with this preset because this preset brings out so much detail in the shadows that if we don't do that, your shadows have this really nasty kind of look to them. So that's why we always want to expose with a little bit of a bias towards the highlight side or towards the brighter side as opposed to towards the shadow side. The more shadows, the more of this nasty noise you're going to get in there, and it's not going to look good at all. All right, so that's it for noise reduction. As far as lens vignetting goes, it has +30 and 30, which gives us that nice even edge-to-edge brightness, which is great. But we're actually going to do a few tweaks here. So let's get started now with our adjustments. And what we're going to do first is we're going to start with a radial filter. Again, the radial filter tool is exclusive to Lightroom 5. So if you're in Lightroom 4, you're going to get this effect basically by using adjustment brushes. So you're just going to paint the effect around the area. So of course, it's a little bit easier and you have a little more control with the radial filter, but it's still doable with without the radial filter. Okay, and what we're going to do is just kind of pull it out. I don't want it to be too noticeable, so what I'm going to do is make it actually fairly large. And let's just make it so it kind of subtly graduates from edge to edge. We're going to pull the feather down a little bit until we have a little bit, let's go about +50. All right, and that's looking pretty solid right there. Now let's go to our adjustment brushes, and you know, I should have probably done that radial filter last, so that was the last effect we did, but that's all right. We're gonna go with sky, cloud, ocean, and what I'm gonna do is let's increase the size over here. We're gonna drag it up and over this entire set, okay? Don't worry, we can always adjust the effect or the strength of this in just a moment. So we're just kind of applying it now. I'm actually gonna apply it also to the water areas. All right, just kind of getting our look, going around them, but don't worry, we're gonna adjust. Okay, so first thing I wanna do is actually tone it down just a bit. Now, first thing I'm gonna do is actually adjust the strength of it down. If you're in Lightroom 4, you can click and drag left and right. Our Lightroom 5 bug is gonna cause us to have to go and make our manual adjustments over here. So I'm just gonna tone it down a little bit, and I'm toning it down incrementally. So I'm not just adjusting one thing, I'm kind of adjusting them all kind of incrementally. So we're just basically we're adjusting everything relative to each other, basically. I'm going to pull down saturation a bit. And right here, it's looking pretty solid. I might just bring up my exposure a little bit so it's not too dark. And the last thing I'm going to do is actually, with this selected, we're going to hold down Alt so I can bring up my eraser. And now with a very light flow, I'm going to bring my flow down to say around 25. I'm just going to paint out of this area. Okay, and I'm kind of just going in circles to just kind of make this area a little bit more subtle and make it just a little bit more attention grabbing. By brightening this center area up, we kind of bring focus into our couple. Everything else still looks pretty natural in the image and so forth. Now, if we wanted to from here, we can add also a little bit of extra burning. If I want, I can grab, say, a negative 0.5 burn, and I drag this up from the bottom just to kind of darken the sand a little bit more and kind of create a little more of that, we'll just kind of drawing the attention a little bit into this area over here, the portrait. But you can also do that with a brush if you do want to paint in certain areas and kind of leave certain areas out. That's totally fine. I would always just recommend leaving these effects on the very subtle side as opposed to, you know, kind of an over top side. What I might do at this point is just adjust my exposure up a little bit just so we kind of balance out now. So we're basically, this area has been darkened so much that we can actually balance and adjust up, which will brighten our people here and our skin without, you know, killing the ambience of our mood, this wonderful mood that we've created. All right, so this is looking pretty solid right now. If we want any additional vignetting, you know, you can always go down to the vignette. You can pull this in and get more, but I'm really happy with where it's at. So I'm just going to undo this. I'm undoing, by the way, by hitting Control Z or Command Z on a Mac. And then this is pretty much done. I like it. I like it where it's at. Hopefully you guys all dig this too. Let's check it out on the before and the after. So here's our before image. Here's our after image. We did a really nice natural HDR image just with a single shot right here inside of Lightroom. All right, great job everybody, and I'll see you all in the next video.